So, hello, Rico.
Hello.
So, say hello, Andrew.
Hello, Andrew.
Yeah. So, this is a retouching session, Photoshop lesson 3. And
Yep.
I had already started the retouching on a new layer. And I guess the recording might have showed in a boat. So, we'll start from here with this woman. So, I was saying that maybe I'll go to the history and go back a little bit.
Yeah. You was talking about the difference between the spot healing brush and the healing brush.
Right. So I'm in the spot healing brush, and if I right click, I can see spot healing or the healing brush. So the spot healing brush, when you click on a spot, it retouches it out. With the healing brush, you have to hold down Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC, and then you choose a source point that you would retouch from, and then to. So I prefer the spot healing brush for things like this, where I'm just kind of cleaning up these little spots. And where I might choose the healing brush would be if I felt that it wasn't picking up the appropriate area to clone from. And so, excellent. Yeah, and so the spot works pretty well. Just go around cleaning up. And so you can see the layers on the right. So I turn off the retouch layer. You can see the before and then see the after, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Before, after. So as you can see, that just a simple kind of spotting of the darker freckles, darker spots, maybe acne, really lets you focus in on the natural look or natural beauty of the model.
It's really subtle. You really don't want to go overboard with
right
like this.
I
still
always
want to keep the part of the original and then just highlight some of them, fixing just tiny bit of it.
Right. I always like natural looking retouching. And so if people even ask me to do like an overly, Barbie doll plastic kind of retouch, I might even pass on that because I just don't like, I can do that. And I mean, basically you would blur a layer or use that frequency separation, but a lot of times I just don't like that look and don't really condone it in some ways. Okay, so that's spotting. So when it comes to like under the eyes, see how it just got a little dark under the eyes? What I do for that is I don't retouch onto the first layer I created, the retouch layer. I create a new empty layer. So I go down to my layers panel, the second option from the right, and I hold Option, and then I'll just say under eyes. And then I create a new empty layer. And then anytime you use a tool, you should always look up to your options bar and see what the options are for that specific tool.
The options bar, you're talking about the top.
That's right. The top horizontal area.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens is, in this case, it's content to where. So I don't know if I want spot healing or. So the main thing is I just say sample all layers because there's nothing on this new empty layer. And if I were to be retouching without sample all layers, it wouldn't do anything. So in this case, when I say sample all layers, in the options bar, it will make it so I can pick up information and put it onto that new empty layer. So what I do is I do something that looks a little drastic at first, but then I can dial it down. So what I do is I make my brush a little bit larger than it was before. I go under the eyes, and then I just kind of drag until it kind of takes it away. And then if I have some remnants, I use a smaller brush to kind of do that. And so I overdo it intentionally at first. And the one thing I've learned is if you're retouching and it's kind of blending the wrong color, another good thing to do is to choose the brush tool, and then I make the opacity low. So I'll make it like a 15, 17, that's fine. And then I make it a little bit larger. So I'm using the right bracket. And then I option click, and it picks up the color of her skin. And then I just kind of do a simple kind of brushing there, so it lightens it up a little bit. So that's before, that's after in the layers panel. And then the next step is...
Can we just see that layer alone to see what you did?
Right, so it's something like this, it just retouched and then a little bit of brush of the skin color. And to do that, I'm holding the Option key on the eye icon to just get to that particular layer.
Right.
Okay, so then when I've gotten this far, of course, it looks artificial. It's too much. So the way I balance it out is I go to the opacity in the layers panel and I bring that down. So as I bring that down, it brings back a little bit of the detail under her eyes, but gets rid of the darkness.
Right.
And if you did bring it down to a certain point and you brought out the detail you wanted, but yet it still seemed like it was bringing out too much darkness, you could try a different layer blending mode, such as lighten and screen. Screen's a little, as you can see, a little too much. So if you were bringing it way down, then it would kind of blend with it. But I tend to just keep it at normal and then bring it up around 50% in this case, 56 in this case. So that's before, that's after.
Nice.
Good?
Good.
Okay, so I'm just going to close this one.
So that is spot healing too.
Share screen. 1 second, go back to okay, so you see Photoshop now?
I see Photoshop now. I see the ice mountain and boat.
Oh, the boat. Okay, great. And then, why does it keep doing that? Share screen. Go to desktop. Share screen. Okay, and now you can see the guy with the freckles and a little bit of a mustache, brown.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, so here's just a kind of more extreme version. So same thing again, just to review, this is how we learn. I will just do a Command Option J, create a new layer. I just call it retouched, or I might say face or something. I choose J for this spot healing brush. And then I have a brush that's just a little bit larger than the freckles, and I go around and just spot those areas. And all I'm really looking for is the larger ones and the darker ones, the ones that might distract. I don't mind him being freckled. It's natural. It's his look. It's just the ones that might be a little too strong and blend in. So I'm just kind of going around, and then you see a little acne. I get rid of the acne or scratches, whatnot, you know. The thing that you notice when you do this type of spot healing, retouching, is just a little bit makes it look so much more natural. So if I take, that's before, that's after, it just looks so much more clean, and I've only done a couple areas. So yeah, so just a little bit of spotting all around. And as I said, I'm using a Wacom tablet. I like the feel of the brush, and it just feels more natural, like when I'm doing especially retouching and silhouetting of images. And I used to say that a Wacom tablet, you should get a medium sized, and then I kind of felt it was a little cumbersome, a little too large. And so I'm now moved over to the small, and it suits me fine. So. And that would also mean that, like, if you used a laptop as opposed to a desktop computer, a small would obviously be much more compatible with you if you're traveling and just taking it around town. So, okay, so, you know, like I said, just simple cleanup just kind of really goes a long way. And then once again, to review under the eyes, he's got dark circles, dark bags under the eyes. I go down to the new empty layer at the bottom, second from right, hold down Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC, and would say, you know, something descriptive under eyes. And I do think it is wise to name your layers, because as you work on any project, if you start building up a lot of layers, it can get confusing, like which one is which if you don't do that. Okay, so there we are. So now in this case, I might go over to the clone tool. And then once again, anytime you choose a tool, always check what your options are in the option bar at top. So it says it's set to sample all layers. That's what I want, because it's a new empty layer. And I want to take from a source and put it onto the new empty layer. So I hit the right bracket key, makes a larger brush. And then in this case, I don't need it so high opacity, maybe like 66 is fine. So I option click, and then as I go, it's just retouching it right over the image. So option click, and I move my brush where I'm grabbing from. I don't want to grab from the same area from the left. I keep moving, and we'll grab an area from the middle, from the right. And like I said, I'll overdo it at first. You know, I'll say now there's like no definition under his eyes.
And then you pull down the opacity.
Exactly. And then I go over to the opacity.
I think that's the part most people missing, because when they do this,
Right.
they feel like, oh, I'm doing a bad job and I don't know what I'm doing. And then that's the part when
so
you're not paying attention to the opacity when you pull it down.
Exactly. So here we are at 54% opacity, and so it blends nicely. Okay.
I think people take a makeup class would help with this. So they don't...
Makeup class? Yeah, a little makeup on. Some people are harsher than others, you know, he's got a lot of freckles, but. Okay, so let me close that. Well, maybe I'll keep that and just move over. So I'm gonna go to window. So if you go to window, once again, I believe I said it before, but just a reminder. If you go to window, that's where you will find any of your panels. So if for some reason your layers panel is missing, you would just go to window, layers, well, not learn. This is like a new option in CC. Which is nice. They have like these features where you know, right in Photoshop, you can kind of focus on different themes. But it's window and then layers, and then the layers panel pops back up. So also going to window, you'll notice at the bottom is a list of all my open documents. So I don't do tab docking. I like to have things floating because it's easier for me to do photo compositing, jump from one image, drag it over to another. So let me see, boat on water. So I wanted to show a pretty cool feature where the engineers of Photoshop have done some pretty cool tricks with the algorithms that work with pixels. So here we have a boat on water. And I'm just going to, once again, Command J, create a retouched layer. And they made it pretty simple now where I can just grab a lasso tool. So I like to choose the Polygonal lasso tool. I just do kind of a large selection around the boat and the shadow. And then if you press Shift and Delete, you will get the fill panel, and it defaults to content aware. You can
Where
also,
we talk about this on the first lesson on the content aware fill.
maybe, but this kind of goes hand in hand with this type of imagery for retouching. So I thought it'd go over. Yeah, so edit, fill, and then that's another way of getting to it. And then just so you know, if you're in a marquee and you right click, you get the contextual menu, and then you can choose fill there too. So those are 3 different ways that you can get to the fill dialog box. So it defaults to content aware. I hit OK. It does its thing. It does a pretty great job. So you can't even tell there was a boat there before. You know, kind of blends in. And if I did feel that there were, you know, certain kind of funky areas around the edge, I would just go down to my spot healing brush, make it a little bit larger, and then just kind of clean up those areas. It does a pretty good job. Turn that off and then go back to window. So here's another example. So landscape with trees. I might say, you know, I like this, but I'm going to crop it in, or I just want to get rid of the tree on the left. So I would choose my square marquee, second tool from top. Make a semi-loose selection around it, getting some of the grass, some of the sky. And then I'm going to option drag the marquee to kind of take a little bit away, cut it a little bit away. And then, like I said, you can just do Shift Delete to bring up content aware, hit OK. So here it did a pretty good job on the sky, but it didn't do the best job on the grass, on the the horizon line, I guess you could say. So what you can do is go to another retouching tool. So if I click on the spot healing brush area, the drop down will give me the patch tool. So what I can do is I can click and do a kind of drawing. And as I click and move it over, I'm just lining up that preview. And then it does a really nice kind of perfect line.
Right.
As you'll notice that with this tool, if you look in the option bar, it's set to source and destination. So those are the settings that you want. Well, it's set to source. And then if I said destination, then it would do the opposite. So this one I do a selection. Now, if I click it to destination, it's just kind of copying it, but not overtaking the original area. So I like it to clean up the original. So what I'll do is I'll just line it up, let go, and then it's done its retouching. So that's the difference between source and destination.
Source and destination.
Yeah. So once again, source would be, you would make your selection. So let's just go back. Go to the original. So I'm just going to do this with, well, yeah. Maybe I'll do it on the, well, there's not much. I'm trying to see which has more imagery on each side. But start off with the marquee. Make a selection, shift delete, content aware, hit the return key, and it does its algorithm. And then the sky's a little abstract, but it filled it in kind of nicely, but the horizon line's wrong. So then what I would do is I could make, okay, you want to make sure you're not in the marquee anymore. So I go back to the patch tool, which is underneath the spot healing brush, patch tool. And it's set to source. So when it's set to source and I select it and then move it following the preview to make sure it lines up, then I can do a nice retouch like that. Now, if I set it to destination and I click and I drag, it would let me move it as if I'm moving it to a new destination, but it would not do anything to the original. So I always pretty much prefer source. It's just a one step to get two steps finished.
It's almost before and after, just if you put
exactly
that into a simpler word.
Yeah, it takes out another step, you know. So then what I would do is, I'm still in the patch tool. I might click and select this kind of strange cloud and then move it up here, and then it blends more like that. And I'm just looking for darker areas that kind of take away from the smoothness of the sky. So this is pretty good, but I might just want to kind of blend it a little bit more. And then I just click to get out. Now there is also the, where is it? There it is, content aware move tool. So this is pretty cool. So here we are. And I might do a Command J so I have it on a different layer just so we can see before and after. But I do a selection. I've chosen the content aware move tool in my toolbar, content aware move tool underneath the patch tool. I made a selection, and then when I click in the middle and I move it over to here, and then hit return, that's pretty cool, right? So
Yes.
what that does is it moves it.
It by itself.
Yeah, it'll move it, and then it'll kind of retouch behind. It's kind of similar to the patch tool. So you could choose either way, you know. Well, the patch tool is more like removing, and this is more like moving and then removing behind it. So those are two different options, yeah. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. So yeah, here's another one where, let's see how well this will do with that content aware. So I tend to at least try the content aware fill first. You know, so I'll do a selection around it. And you don't want it too tight around the subject because it needs to read the information around it so it can build up a pattern. So the pattern of the trees, the pattern of the water. And then just like I said, shift delete, content aware, hit return. And it does its algorithm. So here it kind of was strange, right? So here it looked like it got confused. There's a lot of very kind of strange different patterns here. It's not kind of taking it. So what I might do is, with this type of challenge, get out of that selection. A lot of times people will take like the clone tool. So let's go over the clone tool now. So the clone tool, I'll move down here. So the clone stamp tool, technically, that you do have to hold down Option. So you'd hold on Option at a point, and then you click to retouch. And then always, once again, check your options bar for the options related to that tool. So I move it back up to, I like to do 90 because it kind of blends a little bit as opposed to 100. But 90 or 100 is fine. So now when I do an option click and then I click over it, it just takes the original area and then clones it over to the right. But when you're retouching, things like this can get, tedious or, time consuming. And so let me just turn that off. Okay. What I will tend to do is I will choose my Polygonal Lasso tool and I will make a selection of an area. And that's, Polygon Lasso tool, you make a selection around, and at the end, you'll see a different kind of icon. That means you're going to complete the selection. Then you click in the middle so you can move it, and I move it over to an area that I want to clone from. And then I would right click in that selection, say feather, and I want it to blend. So in this case, feathering, the higher the feather, the softer the edge. So in this case, I'm gonna do like a 4. And then I would do a Command J to make a new layer, choose the move tool, and then I can kind of move it over. And 4 is even a little too light. I probably should have done like a 12 or something. And then when I drag it over, it has a similar pattern, but it looks like it's a little bit dark because I picked up some of the darker things. So then what I would do is I can do a Command L, Control L on a PC, bring up the levels panel, and then go to the mid-tone slider. If I go a little to the left, it makes it a little bit lighter, so then it kind of blends in with the background. And then I would choose the Spot Healing Brush tool, and then kind of do edges to kind of blend that in. And some of these edges here. So my point is that, a lot of times it's just wise to take the information that you have. So another example would be I go back to the background layer because you want to grab from where the information is. And I choose for his head. I go around like where I want it to fill, right? Now here's something that's interesting. Say you do a selection like this and it's too tight. Instead of like deselecting and redrawing again, you can right click and you can choose transform selection. And then you can click and pull up, and then it makes your selection larger. And then you just hit return. And so you're still in the selection. You didn't have to get out. And what I do is I then, holding shift, will just move this a little bit to the right. And then in this case, I will make the feather larger like I should have done with the other one, like 14. Make sure you're in the background layer, and then do a Command J, and then choose my move tool. And then when I click and drag, it lines up perfectly, and it blends the water, and it blends the greenery or the trees in the back. So I think that's kind of like a successful way of doing retouching a lot, as opposed to...
If we don't put in 14 in the feather, it might not have this better result, because... Right. You need to... A higher feather gives it a softer edge, which then blends in the, like the water. Right.
And I still might have to like go in and just do the edges, but so as an example, I've got that was before, that's after, that's before, that's after. And then with this one, I might even just kind of merge that down. So what I did is I move that layer down. Let me do that again. Move that down by dragging. And then I did a Command E, where you could right click and you could say merge down, and then it becomes part of the background. So I could do that again, Command E, or right click, merge down. So now it's all just part of this image. And so I'm just going to choose this selection. Make a selection around it, and I'm going to move it over to a similar area I want to grab from. And this time I'm going to right click, feather, choose 14 so it has a softer edge. Command J to make a new layer from the background. Choose my move tool, and then I can just kind of drag it over. And so in this case, it looks like the pattern's pretty good, but it's too bright. So that's where I do that Command L for levels. Comes up, I go to the midtone slider, and this time I bring it a little bit to the right to make it a little bit darker. And then I choose the spot healing, and I'll go in, I'll kind of blend certain things where the pattern doesn't seem to fit up. It's not perfect. I mean, I would, take more time. I was working on a project. I clean it up. And then I might just briefly choose the dodge tool and then make a large brush. I'm holding down the right bracket, making it much larger. And then a very low exposure, like 8. I might just kind of tweak it a little bit so it lightens up a little bit and blends it a little bit more.
You really have to be patient with this. A lot of, a lot of people think that this is a 10-minute job. It's really not a lot of times.
Right, because I might merge it down and then say, I see this imperfection and go, and then I might say, it's not really doing it with the healing brush, and I move back to the clone tool. And then with the clone tool, I would option click an area and then clone it over. And so that brings more so I think of it as the spot healing brush tool is blending and getting rid of an area, whereas I think of the clone tool as grabbing more kind of exact or realistic areas. So I grab some of this, cancel. Okay, I'm still in the spot, so I want to be a clone. So just option, and then as I click, I can drag over. So just be aware of where it starts and where it ends. If I wanted to bring up a bunch of this dark water over, but I started over here, I option clicked, I'd only be bringing out kind of like the mid-tone range. So yeah, so there's that. Save. And let's see, what are those? Okay, so then here's an issue that comes up is wrinkles. So we did, freckles, we did under the eye, we did content aware fill, content aware move. And so here's just more kind of skin focused retouching. So I go back to the spot healing. Once again, I always want to make a new empty layer. So I'll just say, face. So I'm on the top layer. The brush is way too big from the last project. So I hit the left bracket to go down. And then in this case, I just want to go gently over some of these areas that are stronger. So I don't want to get rid of everything because it'll look fake, but I want to kind of take it down just a little bit. So just taking out some of it. And then wherever it's a bit stronger, then I can just take it down. So I'll mute my phone. The thing I really like about retouching is, like I said, is that if you go to some of the darker areas, more pronounced areas, you don't even have to do a huge amount. It's just if you do some of the more kind of distracting areas, and then you turn the on, turn it off, it looks so much different. That's before, that's after. You can really focus more on the model or the subject much better. Let's see what that does. Yes, I'm blending that so it's not so dark either. Any questions about this process? Rico?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. It's
I think sometimes when I personally do it, it's one thing I said earlier. It's I'm making the tool is too big, the selection too big. I think keeping it small, it's easier to just.
Yeah, I did some retouching in New York, and for product retouching and stuff, and that was the thing that when they, some of the higher ups, the higher end retouchers would say it was always use like a small brush and go over the kind of detail to blend it. If you use a large brush, it kind of gets too kind of mushy, too pixelated, so that was something that was kind of etched in my memory from those earlier experiences. So yeah, so I'll just do a kind of cleanup. So you'll see just how much a little bit of retouching really kind of gets the focus on the natural beauty of the model. And then, so then the question might arise, so what do you do about these kind of cheek lines? You want them to stay, but what's the best way to kind of make it not as strong, more natural? So once again, I do the empty layer. So here's the empty layer at the top, and then I'll choose like the clone tool, and then of course it's set to a large brush from last time. Left bracket, bring it down, maybe a little bit medium so it goes over. And then, like I said, I can overdo it at first, similar like the way we did with the under the eyes.
Oh, okay.
So I'm overdoing it at first. Oops. So remember how it picks up. You got to make sure you're in the right cloned area. So option click. I always do a little bit at a time. I don't want to, people tend to be in a rush all the time, but it's good to be thorough. Okay.
So you can see, you guys could see Andrew is constantly picking up the skin tone next.
Yeah, right. And then another way that I take it further is, like I did with under the eyes, is I would switch over to my brush, left bracket to make it smaller, and then I option click on the background to pick up that kind of skin color. And then of course it's different on the right side, so you option click again, and you get a more kind of orangish, darker color. And of course it's overdone, So one thing I will also do before changing the opacity, so that's before, that's after, it's overdone, is I have some actions that I've created, for different things and for, social network banners and stuff. And one of them is I can add noise. And it's already set to my kind of, what I consider a good average. So I might bring it down. I want it to look natural. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing the amount down. And if you hold shift, it jumps. And
can you tell them what add noise is?
Right. Well, that's what I'm about to do. So with the add noise, you're adding texture. So what happened was when I overdid the retouching in that area so it'll blend, and even though I'm going to lower the opacity, I want to add a little texture so it feels like skin texture with the pores in it. So what I'll do is I'll go to filter, add noise, and I have, like I said, an action, but you can just go up to filter, noise, add noise. And then if you hold the shift key when you're in the amount area, you can click down and it does kind of different. So what I'm looking for is this, where it looks like the texture is blending, but it's not too large pixels. And it's set to Gaussian and monochromatic, which kind of keeps it with the color of the skin. So when I hit OK, the texture kind of blends with the other texture. But then last touch, so I go to opacity, and I bring it down to bring back detail. So I'll bring it down to about 54. So before it's a little strong, here it's a little bit more natural. Now you can really focus on the beauty of her eyes. Nice, right?
Nice, yeah.
Yeah. And then in general, when I do, maybe I'll do a quick, I'll go down to the dodge tool, and then why is it not changing the brush? Okay, the brush is too large, so it was not changing with the brackets, because I probably have to press it a gazillion times. Okay, so I don't want to do that. So bring it down first. And then what I'm going to do is, now that it's to that size, I hit the left bracket to make it smaller. And so I'm in the dodge tool to lighten, and I'll make the exposure like a 10 or 10. And then I can go into the face, make sure you're on the face layer. And then I'm going to just kind of like maybe more like a 20. So I can lighten her eyes a little bit. So I can bring out the kind of beauty of her eyes. And then
I don't see where you're.
Okay, so if I go to the history panel,
Yep.
and I go back to Dodge, it's very subtle, but if I go back to Dodge, it's kind of like her eyes are normal. And then if I take it to the end, you might see that it's lighter, but I'll just do it some more. So I'm on the face layer. You can see the woman, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And then the options bar has it set to 23 exposure, which is like the strength. Maybe I'll make it a little higher so you can see it. And then I just go into the eyes.
Is your mouse moving?
Yeah. You should be able, can you see it?
I cannot see it at all.
Okay.
Oh, I can see it now. It's on the ruler.
Ruler. Oh, that's just a ruler moving. But you should see the eyes. If you look at the eyes, they've gotten lighter.
Can you move your mouse?
Okay, now you can see. Now if I turn the face on off, you can see the eyes are lighter. See?
Yeah.
So that's one thing I might do is a little bit. So you in general, you want to do everything subtly though. And I might even create like another layer of the eyes first before I do this so that I can bring down the opacity as well. And then another trick I would do is going down to the tool underneath, right click, or clicking the arrow on the right to get to the subtool. I can choose sharpen. I choose a medium brush, and then strength, I want it to be subtle. So I bring it down to like 18. And then I just kind of go over the eyes to bring out some sharpened detail.
I think your mouse is missing again. We cannot see your anchor point.
I'm right over the eyes.
It's not, it's disappearing.
Okay. If you look at the lips, can you see a brush moving in the lips?
No.
Okay, that might be just on your side of things. It should be in the recording, so that should be fine. But I go over the eyes, and then it sharpens the eyes, so that's before and then after. See how much it kind of sticks out? And so the way I work, just, to add to the kind of the workflow, if I choose shift-click the various layers I've worked on, I then go down to the bottom of the layers panel. I command option shift click the folder, and then I will call that, like, say, retouched. And then I'll have all those layers, because I might in the end have various layers. So I might have like, eyebrows, eyes, under the eyes, face, hair as different layers. I put them into this one layer group, and I can turn it on and off as one. Isn't that nice? So you can see before and after. Mm-hmm. Before, after. Okay, great. Let's see. And then I was going to go over this, but it's pretty much the same as like with freckles. It's, if you have another layer, you go over to the spot healing tool. You have a brush that's a little bit larger than the acne or the freckle, and then you just kind of spot. In this case, because of the kind of red that's behind it, I'll most likely have to kind of do some painting as well, though. So I can get rid of the spots, but there's still kind of like a red kind of skin area, kind of. So yeah, spotting. I just thought of another thing I can go over to kind of round this lesson off nicely. Something about eyes, when eyes don't match up and people want them to be more similar. Go over that. See, so I just go around spotting. Brush is just a little bit larger than the acne or the freckle that I'm cleaning up.
Right.
And so with just a little spotting, you can see you can focus so much more on her look, on her natural look, her natural beauty. And clean up a little bit more up here. And then, so in her case, she's still got these kind of splotchy areas from the acne. And so what I would do is I would create a new empty layer, option click on the new layer icon, and just call it face. And then I would choose the brush tool. And then here's the trick, is what you do is, you want it set, so you check the options bar and it's set to 17. So I option click an area, and then I just kind of maybe make it a little bit larger so it blends. And then I just keep my left hand close, my second finger close to the options bar or a key, option key. And then I just click as I go, because that way I'm picking up the natural color of the background. I want to get over the blotchiness, but I want to pick up the kind of range of color of her skin.
And here, you don't have to click all layers?
No, it's a new empty layer I created. So I created a new empty
So when
layer.
it's sample, it's actually sampling the layers underneath?
That's correct. So it's sampling the layer underneath. And there is no option in the option bar to choose that. It just kind of knows. And then it's sampling some, darker areas of skin. I'll option click. And then a lighter area, I'll option click. And then I'll kind of blend it in. And the main thing is I'm doing a lot of option clicking with my left hand on the different range of tone. So when I see that there's a light area, I pick up the light, but I don't want it to be too drastic. So I'll blend it in a little bit, but then I'll option click this darker area on the cheek and then bring that back. And if it's too strong, you got to lower the opacity. So I'll bring it down to 9. See? And this is how you can also soften if you wanted to soften, without overdoing it. So I can kind of take some of the glare away from the forehead. And just keep option clicking to different areas so it's following the range of tone of the skin or the color of the skin. Okay, and then when I get to a certain point, that's before, that's after, I will then go up to, and I'll just do it normally because you don't have my actions, which I will give you my actions in the future though. Okay, Rico?
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
You mentioned
email. So filter, and then I just go down to noise, and I would say add noise. And then I would, now in this case, it's kept the last settings. So it's at 1.74, so it's pretty good. And I might just click to the right of that and then use my up arrow key.
Is that max number you should not go over?
Well, in this range, the 1.5 to like 3 areas normally where I stay for skin. The higher you go, and you get,
my God.
yeah, you get an effect like that. And even down to like 4, it still is pretty prominent. So, if I hold shift and then click with the up arrow in that numerical field, I'll be able to jump in like 10% increments. That's not really 10%. It's supposed to be, but it's doing it like 1%. All right, see, so that's too hot. So I'll go down to say, you can also select and just type in like 1.5 or something to see how that looks. So that looks pretty good. It's got some texture there, but you don't see the kind of other colored pixels so much. And it's using the Gaussian kind of blur to it. So then I hit OK. And then I might just bring the opacity down just a little bit. But in this case, we want it to be a little higher because it's taking out the kind of blotchiness of her skin. And then once again, I can shift click these 2 top layers, hold down Command Option Shift or Command Alt Shift or Control Alt Shift on a PC. Click the layer group icon, call it Retouched. And then I have it all in one folder so I can turn it on and off as one. Before, after.
Huge difference.
Yeah. Okay, let's get.
And you said something about the eyes.
Well, I'd already did the eyes in the wrinkled one. But,
oh, okay. Yeah. No, you talk about the uneven eyes. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. So, yes. So, let's go back to. No, where is it? It's the acne one. Okay, so if someone was looking at this and a client says, the eye on the left is nice, but the eye on the right looks a little kind of tired or lazy, It's not as balanced as the one on the left. So even though this image isn't the best, it's from the, so just a shout out. If you look to the right of some of the names of these photos I have, it says Pexels. So Pexels.com. Pexels.com is a good stock photography where you can get free stock to work on projects and images. And I believe there is a range of different criteria of usage terms. So there's, there might be like you can use with a type of change to the image, and others you can just use directly. But Pexels.com is a good site for that. So in this case, I have this image, and like I said, the client might say that they want both eyes to be similar. And so I will choose now what I like to do is, besides using the select tools, I like to use the quick selection tool. So let me go over that a little bit. So that's underneath the foreground and background section. And then what happens is, make sure that this is recording. So I can then choose, like if it's set to mask areas, and when you paint, it's everything but what you're painting, which doesn't make sense to me. So I always set it to selected areas. And then depending on the subject, I can change the color. So if it's a red Corvette I'm trying to select, I obviously don't want to be in red, so I might choose green. So in this case, I'll just keep green. So I said, okay. And then, so I have my brush set to 100. And then when I paint, I'm painting a selection. So when I hit Q again, it shows me the selection. Q, I'm in quick mask mode. Q, I'm back to the selection. And I like the kind of organic or natural feel of this sometimes. So I will use it to paint a selection. And then once again, I want to blend the edges. So I right click, choose feather. In this case, I might choose like a 6. I don't need it to be so high. And then I do a Command J or Command Option J, and I can call it I. Choose my move tool. Oops. And turn that off. Oops, I don't want that. A little too strong with the acne there. Okay, so you can't see anything if I turn it on or off because it's right on top of it.
Right.
But if I click on the layer and then move it over, you can see me moving it over. And then what I'm doing is I'm just kind of lining it up. And then of course it's going the wrong direction. So I do a Command T for transform. And then when you right click, you can just say flip horizontal. And then it's flipped. And then I hit return. And then I just use my arrow key to kind of nudge it down. See?
Yep.
So that's something I've had to do in different projects. And what I might do is I might turn it off, and choosing with the ruler and the move tool, can then drag a guide over.
Make sure it's aligned.
Right, so I can make sure that the beginning of where it is aligned on the left, and then the top and the bottom is aligned there. And I might even do another one so it's like right at the edge. So then when I go here, I know that I can just kind of nudge it a little bit to make it a little bit more exact. And then I hit Command colon to turn off the guides. And it's, it might not be perfect where I might have to then do some retouching above the eye.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's a kind of quick solution to fix this. If a client feels like one eye is a lazy eye or tired eye, it looks better. Because the other one does look tired and kind of darker. Whereas in this case, she looks brighter,
Yep.
So
awesome.
I think that's
really helpful. Sometimes I remember when I was doing retouching for many employees when I was working at a bank, and you will see one eye is perfect, the other eye is not perfect. We have to cut out the other half of the glasses. When the person was wearing a glass, we had to take out all the highlights and all of that.
Yeah, so you use what you have. I mean, a lot of people will kind of, what I consider kind of work too hard when it comes to retouching, where they use the clone tool and they will grab an area and they will just kind of use a small brush and keep, retouching, where a lot of times you can just grab part of the image and duplicate an area like the eye and just flip it and then retouch around it. Or, if it's a good example is if it's a grass field or hill and there's like a ditch or a section you want to get rid of, people will clone and kind of build up the grass and all that, where you can do like the patch tool and just kind of drag and move it over, or make a selection, make a new layer of a good grass area, and then drag it over that bad area. So I think that's a good range for retouching. Is that helpful, Rico?
Yes, that's very helpful. This is our lesson 3. Just I think I want to go over and just do a conclusion on what Andrew just said, that use whatever you have on your image. Don't try to overbuild or try to come up with other pixels that it's come out from random. A really good example here is we are just using the eyes that she have and you.
That's right.
It's her stuff. We're not trying to come up with a new eye from the other person.
Sure.
Yeah.
So thanks. And
Thank you.
hopefully we'll do Photoshop lesson 4 soon, come up with a new theme.
Yep. See you next week.
Great. Thank you.